Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
So our bodies are really, really smart.
Right.
They have amino acid protein needs. They have micronutrient, vitamin, and mineral needs. I don't care how many calories I eat, if I'm not hitting what my body naturally needs, it's going to tell me to eat more.
Right.
So, it doesn't matter what the, carb load is or calorie count or whatever on those boxed keto foods. We overeat them because they're not naturally satiating. But a massive bowl of kale and steak and avocados and olives and olive oil and feta cheese and this massive, salad, beautiful concoction, that'll keep me full for hours. I'm not going to overeat that.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Grin, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed registered dietitian and author Molly Devine. Molly has years of experience specializing in adult weight management, integrative and functional nutrition, diabetes management, food allergies and sensitivities, wellness education, and customized meal planning. We discussed Molly's journey into keto, what a clean way of eating keto is, some of her favorite foods, keto and gut health, some common keto mistakes, and her one tip to get your body back to what it once was. So I really enjoyed meeting and interviewing Molly Devine. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the interview. All right. Welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin, and I have a great guest today, Molly Devine. She's a registered dietitian and author. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. And I was noticing you have published 7 books. Is that right?
I have. The 7th will be coming out next month, and all nutrition related. Many of them do have a ketogenic dietary approach topic, but for a multitude of different conditions and reasons.
Okay. Yeah. And my thought going into this was to talk a lot about keto because it's something I touch on my show quite a bit, but we never really go deep into it. So I figured you'd be a good guest to do that with. And maybe before we get into that, explain how you got into keto and then how you got working with clients. I know you're a dietitian and things like that. So.
Yeah. So interesting kind of story. I came to nutrition and dietetics a little bit second career in life. I actually hold a bachelor's of science in language and linguistics from Georgetown University,
Okay.
which is very unrelated to nutrition. I, about a decade ago, was kind of at a crossroads in life and trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, and started actually a catering business out of my home. I was a single mom with 2 young kids at the time, and really wanted to find something that I could work from home, kind of do on my own. I always loved food and cooking, and I really believe strongly in sustainable ingredients, locally sourcing these things. And through that whole process, I had a lot of clients that were asking me about specific dietary needs. They needed to be gluten-free, or they were looking for low carb. I had no idea what gluten was at the time, to be honest. And so as I started kind of researching some of these things, I was like, wow, there's a whole profession out there that focuses on good, healthy food, nutrition, addressing healthy lifestyle through what we eat. So went back to school, became a registered dietitian, which is a little bit of a process, but, and then always knowing that when I went into this field, I wanted to have my own private practice, and I wanted to have the focus be on food. So I kind of, say I'm a food forward dietitian. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to go to a dietitian, they're going to tell me I can eat nothing but, lettuce and rice cakes for the rest of my life. But I believe food should taste good. I believe that food is the best medicine that we have. So I really like to empower my clients to be able to, yes, live a healthy lifestyle, but focus on the food part. So that's how I became a dietitian. And I swim regularly. I was a competitive swimmer growing up, and swim every day out at our club pool, and ran into a friend of mine who was working for this was about 6 years ago, a ketogenic supplement startup company. And he asked me to write some recipes for their website, ketogenic recipes. And of course, as a dietitian, I knew what the ketogenic diet was. It was not as mainstream as it is today. I had never experienced it personally or promoted it with any of my patients at the time. And so, you know, like anything, I believe in hands-on. If I'm going to write ketogenic recipes, I need to start eating ketogenic food.
Yeah.
So I experimented with, you know, recipe development. I lived keto for probably a solid 4 weeks before I really kind of wrote some of the recipes. And in that time, I suffer from an autoimmune condition. I have autoimmune thyroid disease. I've had that since I was a child. And along with that, I have a lot of other autoimmune side effects or symptoms. And many of my biggest symptom at the time was just poor gut health, bloating, just uncomfortable after eating. And it didn't matter what dietary intervention I had tried, I just never really found relief. And in this period of time, my little self-experiment trying to figure out what ketogenic diet meant, I had complete relief of symptoms. So I was like, wow, you know, not only did I have improved energy and felt great, was able to continue with my swimming, my performance improved, my gut health completely did a 180. I felt so much better. So with that, I became a convert of the positive effects of the ketogenic diet and started promoting that with a lot of my client base. I do practice nutrition counseling. I do most of it via telehealth with clients nationwide. Not all of my clients are on a ketogenic diet. I don't believe it's a great fit for everyone. It's not sustainable for everybody in the long term, but I think it's a wonderful solution to a lot of health concerns and medical problems. And it can be, you know, a saving grace for a lot of people. So that's kind of how I got into it. The more that I started working with clients and helping guide them through a well-formed ketogenic diet, I became very focused on the difference between, because at the same time, keto was becoming mainstream. There's a lot of keto on the internet. There's a lot of resources out there. There's Facebook pages, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I became very, very a big advocate for a heart healthy, like real foods based ketogenic approach that doesn't just mean going by the McDonald's drive-through and taking the bun off your hamburger and not eating the French fries, but really looking at quality of nutrition, because I do believe that makes a real big difference. So that's when I started writing some of these books and just kind of sharing my journey and my beliefs and my approach, which has had great success.
Yeah, and maybe for the listeners, what's your explanation of a keto diet?
Yeah, good question. So I like to think of it as like more of a way of eating versus diet, and really looking at lower carbohydrate, so very low carbohydrate, high heart healthy, good heart healthy fats, and moderate protein. Okay. So what that means is majority of what you're eating are, you know, carbohydrates coming from vegetables, mainly those non-starchy vegetables, some low sugar fruits like berries, tomatoes, avocados, excuse me. But really having that focus on those non-starchy vegetables as your main source of carb, high in those heart healthy fats. So things like olive oil, avocados, nuts and seeds, fatty fish, even good quality mayonnaises, which are a nice unsaturated fat, and then moderate quality protein sources. So, you know, including all the proteins, animals, seafood, dairy, eggs, but really looking at quality is so much more important than focusing just on your percentages and grams and numbers all of the time.
Okay, yeah, and that's a Great way to explain it. What would you say? I know you talked about gut health and how you got relief when you went into the keto diet. I know that some people have gut issues for a lot of different reasons, right? Can you pinpoint exactly what gave you relief? I know you mentioned the keto diet, but anything specifically that you eliminated or added?
Yeah, good question. So without kind of diving too deep into that, because that could be an entire another hour that we could talk about. Gut health. So when people experience, typical poor gut symptoms, right? So bloating, whether it's constipation or diarrhea, sometimes it's more GERD or indigestion higher up. Usually happens because of a dysbiosis of the gut. So an imbalance of gut bacteria. So in our gut, we have good and bad bacteria. They both have to exist. That's fine. But proper balance is about 20% bad guys and like 80% good guys. So these good guys are the army that they keep the bad guys at bay. And when the bad guys get bigger, they start to take over the good guys' army. And that can happen for a multitude of reasons. So that can be environmental. It can be because of antibiotics that kill off good bacteria. It can be, lifelong poor nutrition. It's more common in women than men, especially as we age. So, my personal journey didn't really have problems until, mid 30s into my 40s. Birth control is a big one. That's the one reason that it affects women more also. It can disrupt your gut health. So what happens when we have more of these bad bacteria than good bacteria? Now we have all these symptoms. Bad bacteria eat sugar. So I like to use the analogy. So a lot of this bad bacteria are yeast-like growths. When you bake bread and you have dry yeast, how do you activate it? You put it in warm, wet environment, and you give it food, like in the form of, sugar or honey or whatever. And it bubbles, it gurgles, it grows, it multiplies, it gets bigger. Same thing happens in your gut. So when we are constantly having these sugars, processed carbs, even good healthy carbohydrates like whole grains or starchy vegetables like potatoes, that is food for the bad bacteria. So the more that we eat of those things, the more that we feed it, it bubbles, gurgles, and grows, and it's continuing to kill off the good guys. So the reason a ketogenic diet helps for gut health, it starves off those bad guys. You're not giving it any of that glucose or carbohydrate food. They have no fuel source. They die off, and it allows you to re-inoculate your system with the good bacteria.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good way of putting it. Because I know, like with gut health, sometimes seeds and nuts can cause issues for people. Even sometimes plant foods can cause issues. Do you ever find yourself with some clients maybe having to cut those out? Even dairy, right, can cause issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a difference between a food intolerance, so actually having an intolerance to a food, which has nothing to do with my gut bacteria, or a food allergy. And or saying, kind of maybe it's the nuts, maybe it's the dairy, maybe it's so I have a lot of clients that come to me so frustrated. They've been diagnosed with blanket IBS, right, which is basically a medical term and we have no idea what your problem is. And they're frustrated because it's hard to pinpoint the one thing, and it feels like everything I eat is causing me discomfort, or is it this or is it that? And my belief is that when we have this dysbiosis of the gut, everything causes a problem. So like the nuts, which wouldn't normally cause a problem, are causing a problem because I have this, at the core, it's broken. So my goal when I work with people on gut health is healing their gut, looking at that root cause, and getting to the place where I can tolerate anything because my core is fixed and healthy. And so now again, different than a true food intolerance. So if somebody truly has an intolerance to dairy, that's something that we can eliminate. But my goal with everybody is to eliminate as few things as possible. Because I think it can be this mind game of now I'm afraid to eat anything because I have no idea what it is that's causing me my pain.
Right. And, you know, we talk about like elimination diets, and obviously with carnivore eating, that's become like the ultimate elimination diet. Would that maybe be a place to start, and then maybe add in some foods after that, and figuring out, well, what was causing that, or letting the gut heal for, well, let's just say, I don't know how long it could take a gut to heal. Probably depends on how long that person has been eating, let's just say, a standard American diet, as to how long it's going to take them to heal. But would starting with something where like the almost like the ultimate elimination diet, like the carnivore, and then sort of slowly adding back foods on top of that?
Yeah. So good question. I think that I would start, rather than a true carnivore diet, which does eliminate a lot of those plant-based foods. So those, mainly it's non-starchy vegetables, and those are so micronutrient dense. So our vitamins and minerals, I like to try to keep those in as much as possible. So the place I would start would be more of pulling out all carbs, all sugars. Again, not the non-starchy vegetable carbs, but
can you list what are your favorite non-starchy vegetables?
Yeah, so greens, so leafy greens, okay. My favorite one is arugula. So arugula is one of the most micronutrient dense foods out there. It has a nutrition profile that's almost on par with organ meats, which is, the big benefit of eating organ meats is it has all those vitamins and minerals. Arugula has a close profile to those. Spinach, kale, those types of things. I love any time that there's more color. So things like eggplant or bell peppers that have nice color to them. Even tomatoes that on a ketogenic diet in smaller amounts. Asparagus and broccoli and cauliflower. So the main starchy vegetables are going to be like your tubers, right? So potatoes, sweet potatoes, even winter squash, things like, acorn, butternut, pumpkin, those are a little bit higher in the carbs. Beans and legumes are a starchy vegetable, and corn, and peas. So those are kind of like, I avoid those, and then everything else is in the category of things to enjoy. Okay. But I do think, with the gut health, like eliminating those triggers of kind of feeding the bad bacteria and seeing if that, usually my protocol is about 2 weeks to see if there's an improvement in symptoms. If everything's going great, I'm feeling better, I don't feel the need to remove anything else. If there's still sensitivity to maybe something like dairy, or, you can become more restrictive as necessary, but I don't start there.
Okay. Yeah. So you start with more like meats, fishes, things like that, quality meat, wild fish, and then non-starchy vegetables. And if those things, because, spinach and kale can cause issues for people, especially if you're not cooking and you're eating it raw, then if that's still not helping, then you might maybe eliminate some of those as well and get more restrictive. But you start sort of less restrictive and then maybe curtail it if need be.
Correct. And kind of the main focus is on those good, heart healthy fats. So including like, the olive oil, the nuts, the seeds, avocados, those types of things as well.
Gotcha. So what are your favorite things to cook in?
My favorite dishes, or?
Oh, like what do you use to cook in? Because I know that like you want to use certain oils, well, obviously not vegetable oils, right? So you're cooking most of your food in what type of oils?
Olive oil is my go-to for everything. So we go through a vat of olive oil in our house. So olive oil is my go-to. Avocado oil is also an amazing cooking oil. It has a very high smoke point. It's great. It's just more expensive. So I tend to use that more for finishing, for the flavor, or if I'm making dressings. But my go-to is olive oil. You're correct. Avoiding the vegetable oils, canola, soybean oil, corn oil, those types, they're more pro-inflammatory. They're higher in omega-6s versus 3s. I do use coconut oil or butter on occasion, more for flavor. And so the reason being is coconut and butter are both saturated fat. Not that that's a bad thing at all, but you always want to have higher unsaturated fat intake versus saturated for just positive lipid panel. what I kind of, because I have a lot of clients that will come to me with dyslipidemia, which means, basically it's high cholesterol or an imbalance in their lipids. And we have total cholesterol, we have LDL, which is our bad cholesterol, and HDL, which is our good cholesterol. We want our HDL to be through the roof, that's heart protective, and our LDL to be lower. LDL gets elevated because of saturated fats. So somebody that has been consuming, a mecca of coconut oil and, butter and dairy, their LDL is going to be higher. That does not mean that that is unhealthy. That does not mean that that's a problem. And that's something, we can kind of go into that. But there's a lot of just general practitioners that will say, oops, LDL is high, you need to go on a statin. Right. And so for which I'm very anti, unless absolutely medically necessary. And so for the clients that come to me to try to improve their lipid panel through nutrition, I'm like, we need to have more unsaturated fats than saturated fat in your diet. So your go-to needs to be those olive oils. Use coconut when you want Indian flavor or Thai flavor, or for the coconut flavor, not just as a go-to.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that. With LDL, I think it's all context related. If the person is healthy and metabolically flexible and, doesn't have insulin resistance and things like that, then having a higher LDL is not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Well, and particle size is the biggest thing there. And so when you look at your standard lipid panel, it has total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, and triglycerides. Those are the main things. Now, some people will have kind of more of a breakdown. You look at, ratios on there. Sometimes particle size will be on there. But triglycerides truly are one of the highest risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So an elevated triglyceride is a bigger risk factor than a higher LDL. Why are triglycerides elevated? Sugars and carbs. So, I see uncontrolled diabetics with their triglycerides are through the roof. Right. But calming down the carbohydrate and sugar in their diet brings that back down to a normal range. And so when we look at, LDL in and of itself, animal fat, saturated fat is not a problem.
Right.
It's when saturated fat is combined with those refined carbs to create these very small, dense LDL particles that can stick together and cause blockage.
Right.
So yes, that's a topic for another conversation. But unfortunately, a lot of traditional medical providers don't dig that deep, and they just say LDL's in the bad range, you need a drug, because it's easier for them to prescribe that than to talk about lifestyle change.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. And what are your like top favorite keto foods that you like to use with your clients? I know you mentioned a few already, but
yeah, avocados are my favorite. And so that's like one thing when I work with people, like, so how do you feel about avocados?
Right, I know. And if they don't like avocado, because I love avocado, but some people don't. Some
people don't. Yeah. I get that. I don't a lot. Yeah. So again, I love. I say like nuts and seeds. I kind of put them in the same category. Pumpkin seeds are one of my favorite go-tos. Not only for flavor, they're great sprinkled on salads or yogurt or whatever. But they're very anti-inflammatory. So that's one of my favorite ways to get good heart healthy fat in there. Olive oil, again, you can't use too much of that.
Sorry to interrupt. My one question on olive oil is, because I've heard some differing things on that, is that the smoke point isn't as high, and you should almost use it as a dressing as opposed to cooking in. I've heard that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I don't buy super fancy, extra virgin cold pressed, the $50 bottle of olive oil and cook with that, because you are correct. You lose a lot of that amazing flavor when you cook it off with a higher heat. But there's no negative health implication to using olive oil at higher heat. Okay. And so I tend to just buy your regular olive oil. My favorite go-tos are either Spanish olive oil or Greek olive oil. So I tend to kind of default to those. And then I use the fancy ones for the flavor for finishing. I also don't cook at super high heats. I'm not, necessarily trying to fry food at that. So kind of sticking at that medium. You also just have to be careful too, when the oil's in the pan by itself at a really high heat, you're going to get all that smoke. So I don't let that oil sit for too long in the pan by itself. Make sure that you're getting your food in there earlier.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. But going back to your favorite keto foods, because
favorite food. Okay.
Yeah. So avocado. Yeah. What about olives?
Love olives. Those are great. Like Kalamata olives are my favorite, just for that nice salty. I add those, and actually had those in my salad today. I love fish, obviously. So, big fan of salmon. We eat that at least once a week usually, but really all the fish. I don't exclude anything there. Aiming for, avoiding farm raised seafood, just for kind of that health profile also, and inflammatory markers. We eat all different types of meat as well. So, beef, pork, chicken, I don't exclude anything there either. But vegetables are a huge, huge, huge part of our diet, and, my diet specifically. And kind of with keto, there's a fear of vegetables sometimes because it is a carb. And so if I'm putting all of my calculations into a carb manager or some sort of app, and I'm looking at my grams of carbohydrate, people freak out about those vegetable carbs. However, like I said, they are full with the micronutrients, right? They're volumizing good, healthy, natural fiber. So I really advocate for getting all of your carbs from like natural foods, right? So what I mean by that is, yes, non-starchy vegetables have carbohydrates, which is mostly all fiber. Nuts have carbohydrates, which is mostly all fiber. Some dairy has carbohydrates, lactose. But looking at carbs from those sources versus, keto granola from keto ice cream, keto bar.
It's amazing. It's just, it's a big marketing thing.
It's a massive marketing thing. And so I work more with total carbs versus net for that very reason, because someone's like, oh, I only had 10 net carbs, but you ate, 80 total carbs from filler junk food from the grocery store. Right. And so I kind of take that carb phobia away. If you're focusing on real foods, your body is processing through kale so much better than it is low carb tortillas. I promise.
Right. So we hear it all the time, whole foods, whole foods that aren't in a box or don't have an expiration date per se, or actually do have an expiration date. They're probably
they will rot.
Right. Exactly. Right? If you don't eat them within a few days, they go bad pretty much. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Not like a Twinkie. Like,
well, and I think there's I'm going to probably butcher it because it's off the top of my head here, but there's a great Michael Pollan quote that I think it goes something like, if it's made in a factory, it's something about like, if it's made in a factory, don't eat it. If it comes from the ground, but like that concept of like, if it comes out of a box, it did not start like that. There's so many, iterations of what that food has gotten to be where it is now. But if it grew out of the ground, that's a whole food. That's the way that it came out. The other thing about those, even keto friendly because of the net carbs on the front of the package, they're not naturally satiating. So our bodies are really, really smart. Right. They have amino acid protein needs. They have micronutrient, vitamin, and mineral needs. I don't care how many calories I eat, if I'm not hitting what my body naturally needs, it's going to tell me to eat more. Right. So, it doesn't matter what the, carb load is or calorie count or whatever on those box keto foods. We overeat them because they're not naturally satiating. But a massive bowl of kale and steak and avocados and olives and olive oil and feta cheese and this massive, salad, beautiful concoction, that'll keep me full for hours. I'm not going to overeat that.
Right. I talk about it all the time, is like, if you eat based off of nutrient density, it's going to just fill you up and you won't be able to eat anymore. And I think the key is doing it for like a longer period of time. Maybe if you've been eating a standard diet for a while, go for a month without cheating, and almost like we talk about like healing the gut. You need to sort of heal the gut so you can sort of know what true, when you're truly full, and then listening to that. Because I do quite a bit of fasting. And of course, if you're going to have a meal or 2 meals a day and that's it, or even, you're going to want to eat things that are nutrient dense, because then you're waiting another however many hours before you eat again.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's one of the things, again, kind of going back to, who's keto right for. I have dealt in my career with a lot of people that struggle from either binge eating or, chronic obesity. And keto is the first time that they've felt naturally satiated, right? And, historic diet culture is eat less, count your calories, go low fat. All of these things make us crave more foods. But when you're eating things that naturally satisfy your body and you can listen to those hunger cues, it is such a beautiful aha moment for so many people that have struggled with poor relationships with food and eating behavior for years. Mm-hmm. And, I love it when I'm working with somebody that is, yo-yo dieted their entire life, really struggled with this, felt shame. What is wrong with me? Why can't I eat less? Why am I overeating? And to say like, yeah, wow, I ate that nutrient dense food, like that perfect word, I ate that nutrient dense food and I wasn't hungry for the next 4 hours. Or I didn't need to finish all of that because I was full. I felt great. Who doesn't overeat a bag of Doritos? Like nobody opens up a box of Oreos and eats one. So like those foods are made to be addictive. Those foods are made for us to overeat them. And so, yeah, so that's kind of like the lovely piece of when I eat nutritious, satiating, good foods, it totally flips that poor relationship that people have with eating, which is it's great to see.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. And usually you run into trouble when you're having foods that are high fat, high carb, right?
Right. Yeah.
Those two combined.
And that's people are like, well, fat. I've been told fat's terrible my entire life. Well, yeah, a McDonald's milkshake that's high in fat but loaded with sugar, or a Twinkie, that is different than an avocado that's high in fat.
Right. Exactly. And what would you say some of the biggest mistakes, I know you've touched on a little bit, that people do when they want to go keto? I know we talked a little bit about that, but what would you say some of the biggest mistakes are?
One of the not getting enough fat. Okay. That's the biggest thing that I see. I think people mistake keto with low carb. And while keto is low carb, it's really high in fat. And for a lot of people, especially, women, who have yo-yo dieted and been told their entire life to eat fat-free food and that fat is going to make them fat, telling them to get majority of their calories from fat is a really hard concept for people to grasp. And so a lot of people are like, hey, I'm doing keto, it's just not working for me. What are you eating? It's basically vegetables and meat and that's it. And there's, it's chicken breast and steamed broccoli.
Really lean.
And I'm
really lean.
And I'm hungry and I'm not seeing any of these benefits. And now I'm hungry. And so now I'm snacking all day and there's never any break of food. I'm getting, that insulin response all day long and I'm just eating nuts all day long because somebody told me that those were keto. So it's now, but if I had taken that broccoli and, chicken and made a chicken thighs and loaded it with pesto and I have oil all over my broccoli, I'm not going to be hungry for nuts at 2 p.m. So not getting enough fats, number one. And that is, it's a hard thing to wrap your head around. But, when I formulate a diet with people and a meal plan and help them understand how to get those fats, then they're like, whoa, I can't believe it worked. I can't believe, I feel better and lost weight eating more fat. I can't believe that happened. That's one. Another one is trying to do it all. It's too fast. So you talked about intermittent fasting. That's very common on a ketogenic diet. The main reason is because you're just not as hungry all the time. Right. It becomes easy. But people try to dive headfirst into doing everything at once. And I believe that, kind of shrinking your eating window or whatever that looks like happens naturally over time and slowly because you've already made a ketogenic transition and you're eating that way anyway. Yeah.
No, yeah. I was just saying a lot of times it's just small changes to your diet. It could be just literally just implementing like the things that you're talking about. It could be putting a full fat, some type of full fat cheese into your salad, or adding avocado or olives onto the salad, or sprinkling olive oil. Like, these are small little simple things, and they can go a long way.
Yeah, and in that vein, we're talking a lot around keto, but I kind of think everybody should segue into not necessarily keto. We're not counting ratios, but most of what I eat are quality proteins, non-starchy vegetables, and heart healthy fat. It doesn't have to be 75% of my diet from fat, but what you learn is that, like you said, by adding those things into my salad, by making sure I include those, I feel better. I'm fuller longer. I don't snack on junk.
Yeah.
And then that, I would say, a third thing that people struggle with, or is a barrier for them, is keto junk food, because you know what, it's a money making business right now. And keto treats and keto sweets, and here's my keto brownies, and and I think it's this idea of and gluten kind of got this, like, a decade ago, if it said gluten free, it was automatically healthy,
right,
and I'm like, candy's gluten free also, it doesn't make it a health food.
Right.
But people say, oh, it says keto and it's keto friendly, and then all of a sudden they're having keto treats after every single meal, and I'm like, would you eat a regular brownie after lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and expect to be losing weight? Like, no, like it's still calories. It's still energy that your body does not need. Just because it says keto on it doesn't make it necessary,
Right.
So, and that's, that's the fault of marketing and all this stuff being available, where people do get away from whole foods, and they do get away from kind of sense of, I probably shouldn't be having dessert after every single meal.
Yeah, I've had some of those keto snacks before in general, and they're pretty they do a good job of making them making you wanting to eat them more and more. That's for sure.
Well, so that's, artificial sweeteners, whether we want to call them artificial or natural or whatever, so sugar, alcohols, and stevia, and all those things that are naturally occurring, but they're still artificial in my mind. They still trigger you to crave sweet. So just because you're not eating sugar, it has that psychological addictive nature of now everything needs to be sweet. So now my beverage needs to be artificially sweetened. Like, this needs to be, and then all of a sudden it excites some of that appetite for more and more and more. So, it doesn't have that necessarily, physical addiction that sugar does, but it's still, this is juicy, I want more, and now I'm eating out of desire versus actual need.
Yeah. I had Jen Stevens on here. I don't know if you're familiar with Jen Stevens. She's a big fasting advocate, but we talked about having, like, a clean fast. And what's a clean fast? And what's happened a lot of times is people will add things into while they're in their fasting times that have those sweeteners in it, and that, there's no calories, but it triggers your hunger, and it triggers you to actually want to consume food. So it makes fasting more difficult, as if you're better off just not having those sweetened foods with what is that? I can't pronounce it.
Erythritol. Yeah.
Which
erythritol.
is, like, I think, like, in everything now.
And I mean, that's like erythritol, mannitol, sorbitol, all those sugar alcohols are huge gut disruptors.
Right.
So I'm like, especially if talking about dealing with like gut issues, like adding in sugar alcohols is like one of the worst things you can do. But and one of the beautiful things about pulling sugar out of your diet is that when you eat a strawberry, or you get like a ripe peach or something, it tastes so sweet and so amazing. And you have so much more, a better receptor for natural low sugar foods. But when you're constantly giving your palate fake stuff, you lose that, right. And so you're right. It makes it's like, I guess like you're quitting smoking and you're, doing fake cigarettes. It just make you think about the other cigarette. Right. So I think keto treats have a place, and in all the cookbooks I do, offer up some ideas. One of my suggestions is make a batch of whatever your favorite, whether it's a sweeter like fat bomb or, keto cookie or whatever, and keep it in your freezer. So that a lot of times I'm having a craving, for whatever reason, it's stress or is it hormonal, but I'm craving something sweet. Sometimes just knowing you have an option, you're like, okay, yeah, I don't need to go out and get anything. I have something here. I'm going to be okay. Or maybe I have like one of those and I'm fine. But viewing that as like a daily occurrence can definitely kind of get people in a bad place with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say that, you make a good point. It's like if you eat really clean, like we're talking for a while, and then you have something sweet, it's almost too sweet. I find that for myself, if I like try something, I think I tried, I don't even know, it was like a key lime pie, just like a little piece of it. I was like, wow, I was like, that is just woo,
yeah, I had like a bite of my, an ice cream cone at the beach or something. And I'm like, whoa, how are you? I'm so thirsty all of a sudden. It's like, how are you eating that? And another strategy too is, just if you're making a keto recipe and it says use a half a cup of, swerve, use less. Use a quart, like it's not in there because of any sort of chemical reason. It's there for the sweetness. So ratchet it down. I always suggest in my books too, like use more natural flavoring. So spices, like add cinnamon in, or use like almond extract, or I love citrus zest is a great addition to things that like bulk up the flavor without adding any sort of sweetener or anything like that in there. So kind of like, and test yourself. Like as I kind of ratchet down the level of sweetness, can I get away with significantly less and still feel like it's a sweet treat?
Yeah. Yeah. And just a change of topic, I wanted to ask you, I saw on your website, keto diet and libido.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this will be a good one to talk about. Yeah.
Well, interesting. That was a, I want to Pop Sugar maybe article that they had asked me kind of, what's the connection, right? So admittedly, that was not my choice topic. But, absolutely. Energy. Like, so I think some of the topics I talked about in there, increased energy, mental clarity. Another one too, like keto naturally, improves body composition when done the right way over time with an active lifestyle. So when I, have lost some of my belly weight and I feel better about myself naked, I feel much more compelled to be naked with my partner, So feeling better about yourself, having that energy. There's also a big connection to hormonal balance, like mainly with women. That's where I work mostly, but in men as well. So, we talk about carbohydrates. They invoke this insulin response constantly. We're being, bombarded with insulin all the time. We develop insulin resistance. That's another topic, but insulin's a hormone. So when I kind of use the analogy of like constantly pressing that gas pedal, it burns out, but it also has an effect on my other hormones. So a lot of times with women, we can balance out a lot of those sex hormones with just not having this like inundation of carbohydrates and insulin all the time. So for a lot of women, it can kind of help balance some of those hormones out, which, gives me better sex drive as well.
Yeah. It's all tied together, right?
It's all tied together. And I mean, that is why I love nutrition so much and why I believe food is medicine. Before I became a dietitian, I believed healthy food was lifestyle and medicine. And being able to share that with people, and understanding that, I don't need a litany of medications to Band-Aid my problems. I need to fix my problems from the inside out.
Yeah, so true. And one of the questions I like to ask towards the end is pretty much all my guests, I asked, what would be one tip you'd give an individual they wanted to get their body back to what it once was 10, 15, even 20 years ago? What would be like one tip you'd give that individual?
Number one, focus on nutrition. So oftentimes, I should join the gym. I should move my body more, body composition change, weight loss, all of those things is like 80% nutrition and 20%, physical activity. You cannot run a bad diet. especially when I'm like, I want to look like I did when I was 20 and I'm 50. Well, guess what? I can't abuse myself and get away with it anymore. So really focusing on what goes in is imperative. I also think kind of looking at it again from a holistic, nutrition is very important, but a holistic approach too. I also need to figure out, what does my movement look like? What does my stress look like? What does my sleep look like? All of these things have huge impacts. And again, when I was in my 20s, stress, I mean, what was I stressed about? Things that I wouldn't blink an eye about now, right? So, kind of looking at these other lifestyle factors. But, and then being kind to yourself. So Rome was not built in a day. You're not going to lose 25 pounds in a week. It's not going to happen. And if you do, it will disrupt your metabolism. It's going to be a slower process, but being committed to that lifestyle and behavior change, especially when it's relating to nutrition, that's where you get to that place you want to be and you sustain it. You don't look back.
That's great. Yep. A lot of good tips there. Yeah. A lot of good
Hopefully.
tips. Yeah, for sure. And Molly, where's the best place for people to learn more about you and your services and things like that?
Yes, probably you can look at my website. So that's msdnutrition.com. You can also shoot me an email at hello@msdnutrition.com. I do work with clients, like I said, nationwide on nutrition counseling. Most insurance plans do cover nutrition counseling at 100%. So most of the clients that I work with, there's no out-of-pocket expense for them. And, that's kind of one of the silver linings of the past couple of years of everything being virtual is that telehealth is normal now. So everybody's used to it, they're comfortable with it, and insurance companies are reimbursing for it. So shooting me an email with any sort of interest. I also, quick questions I can always answer over email as well. But yeah, if you're interested in something like a deeper dive, likely you have some semblance of coverage for that.
Awesome. Well, Molly, this was a great interview. I appreciate you coming on. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Okay. Hey, Get Lean, Eat Clean Nation. Are you a man between the ages of 40 and 60 years old, looking to lose inches around your waist, have significantly more energy throughout the day, and gain muscle, all while minimizing the risk of injuries? Well, I'm looking for 3 to 5 people to work one-on-one with in my Fat Burner Blueprint Signature program, which I've developed by utilizing my 15 years experience in the health and fitness space. This program is designed specifically for those committed to making serious progress towards their health goals over the next 6 months. We will focus on sleep, stress, nutrition, meal timing, and building lean muscle. If this sounds like a fit for you, email me at brian@briangrin.com with the subject line Blueprint. That's brian@briangrin.com with the subject line Blueprint. Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again and have a great day.